Now, we all know what cells are and that everything in the world is made up of cells. But what's a cell membrane? Well, a cell membrane is a semi-permeable membrane surrounding the cytoplasm of a cell. And their main job is to regulate what can go into and what can go out of the cell and what can't. So, what does this mean? Okay, so think of an airport security system. Now, assuming most of us have gone through security at the airports before, we all know generally how they work. When we go through the security guards there check our baggages and they check the people going through security before they travel. And now the security staff needs to decide who can go through and who cannot go through the security. And the people who are considered safe, they allow them to enter, and those who pose a threat are not allowed to go through. By now, you're all probably thinking, wow, Lauren, this is a great analogy, but too bad I still don't understand how the cell membrane works. Wasn't there a reason I was watching this video? Well, don't worry, it'll all make sense soon. But before I can teach you how the cell membrane works and how it decides what can and cannot go through, you need to understand the structure of the cell membrane. So cell membranes are composed of primarily phospholipids and proteins. Now, a phospholipid is a lipid whose head contains a positively charged hydrophilic polar group that is linked to its two nonpolar hydrophobic tails by a negatively charged phosphate group. And these phospholipids form a bilayer where the hydrophobic tails line up against each other with the hydrophilic heads of both sides. Now, the reason why the tails are on the inside is because they are nonpolar and also hydrophobic. And the reason why the heads are on the outside of the bilayer is because they are polar and they're hydrophilic. Cholesterol is another component of the cell membrane. It is found in every cell and it is very abundant in the membranes. And it plays a very important role. It's found in the phospholipid bilayer and it makes the cell stronger. And it also has different effects on the membrane's fluidity at different temperatures. At low temperatures, it does not solidify and it maintains fluidity. And at warm temperatures, it restrains movement of phospholipids and the membrane stiffens, making it less soft. Cholesterol helps remain relatively fluid, and it makes membranes less permeable to small molecules that are soluble in water. Because cholesterol is both hydrophilic and hydrophobic, it is considered amphipathic. And the reason why it's amphipathic is because the areas that are connected to the hydrophilic heads are hydrophilic, and the area that stretches between the hydrophobic tails are hydrophobic. In the bilayer, the blue structure is the cholesterol, and as you can see, it goes from the hydrophilic heads through the hydrophobic tails and back to the hydrophilic heads. Proteins are very important in the structure of the cell membrane because they determine most of the membrane's specific functions. One of the two main categories of membrane proteins is integral proteins. These proteins are permanently attached to the biological membranes and penetrate the hydrophobic core. They can only be removed from the cell membrane with the use of harsh detergents that destroy the bilayer. These proteins float freely throughout the bilayer. They are usually transmembrane proteins and extend through the bilayer so that one end is in contact with the interior of the cell and the other touches the exterior. The part of the protein within the hydrophobic interior of the bilayer is also hydrophobic, and the exposed ends of the protein are hydrophilic. The other main category of membrane proteins is peripheral proteins. Peripheral proteins are attached to the exterior of the lipid bilayer, and they are easily separable from it, and they are able to be removed without harming the bilayer in any way. Because they are not embedded in the bilayer, they are loosely bound appendages, and they are less mobile within the bilayer. As you can see, the peripheral proteins are located on the outside of the bilayer. Because they're located on the outside over here, they are not permanently attached to it and can easily be removed. Glycoproteins are another type of protein located in the cell membrane. Glycoproteins play an important role in the phospholipid bilayer. They are proteins that are covalently bonded to carbohydrates, and they provide specifically for cell-to-cell recognition. As you can see, the blue structure here is the protein, and the red dots coming out from it are the carbohydrates. Transport proteins are transmembrane proteins that help certain substances cross the membrane. The transport proteins have a very important job in the cell membrane. They allow the passage of hydrophilic substances across the membrane, and they are very specific for the substance that moves. So as you can see, certain substances are able to pass through the transport membranes and go through to the other side. Active transport is the movement of individual molecules across the cell membrane. It is what happens when a cell uses energy to transport something. When the liquids inside and outside of a cell have different substances, the cell sometimes has to use energy to maintain an equilibrium or balance of ions and molecules. Passive transport is an easy movement of molecules that does not require energy and work. There are 4 types of passive transport: simple diffusion, facilitated diffusion, filtration, and osmosis. Diffusion is a type of passive transport. It's the movement of particles from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. And this continues until the concentration of the substances are equal. Facilitated diffusion is the passive transport of a substance across the membrane from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration through a carrier molecule. Energy is not required since the substance is moving along in the direction of their concentration gradients. So as you can see, the carrier molecules are bringing the particles from the areas of high concentration to the areas of low concentration, so no energy is required for those to be able to move since the carrier is doing the work for them. Osmosis is a passive transport which is specific to water. The water moves in the direction from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution. In this diagram, we have 2 solutions, one with lower concentration and the other with a higher concentration, and they're separated by a water-permeable membrane. Now, because the solution is has a higher concentration, the water from the solution will rush to the solution through the water-permeable membrane. And because of that, there will be more liquid in this one than in this side of the solution. Exocytosis is the process where the cell expels particles that are too big to diffuse through the membrane wall. Endocytosis is a process where a substance enters the cell without passing through the cell membrane. Endocytosis is divided into 3 types. The first type of endocytosis is pinocytosis, or cell drinking. And that's when small particles are brought into the cell, forming a cavity, and then suspended in small vesicles. The second type is phagocytosis. And phagocytosis is also known as cell eating. And this is the process in which a cell engulfs a solid particle to form an internal vesicle known as a phagosome. The third type of endocytosis is receptor-mediated endocytosis. And this is when specific molecules are ingested into the cell, and this is a result from a receptor-ligand interaction. The only things that can easily cross the membrane are small uncharged molecules such as oxygen. The concentration of oxygen is usually higher outside of the cell and lower inside, and because particles move from areas of high concentration to low concentration, The difference in the concentration allows oxygen to diffuse easily into the cell. As we learned before, the water moves in the direction from a more dilute solution to a more concentrated solution. So in this diagram, the water molecules in the more dilute solution, so the solution with less concentration, they would move to the area of higher concentration. Glucose is able to enter and leave the cell through facilitated diffusion. Because the glucose molecule is so big, it needs help to diffuse through the cell membrane. To move through the cell membrane, it needs help from a transport protein. The transport proteins help the glucose diffuse from the outside of the cell membrane into the cell membrane.